Thank you for joining us this evening.
Bienvenidos a todos a esta reunión de las mejoras para la avenida Colfax. Y vamos a comenzar la reunión en un momento.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in just a moment. I'm going to ask Fernando to bring up our slide deck that we'll be using this evening, and then we'll be able to get started.
Bienvenidos a todos. Vamos a comenzar en un momento. Voy a pedirle a Fernando que ponga la presentación de diapositivas en la pantalla y comenzaremos pronto.
Hi, everybody. I'll put the presentation right on. I was just working through some logging issues, but let me put it up.
Okay, there we go. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I definitely want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Anthony Aragon. I am a community engagement specialist in the Office of Community and Business Engagement with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, better known as DOTI. And just want to welcome you to this evening's virtual community meeting for the West Colfax Area Program of Projects. And just thank you for being here with us this evening. Next slide, please. So for our meeting this evening, we will be providing Spanish interpretation. So for interpretation, please connect using a tablet or a computer. You will see momentarily the globe icon in the bottom right hand of your screen. And it is important that you select the language of your preference, which is, if English is your preferred language, you do need to select English as well.
Bienvenidos a todos a la reunión de esta noche. Mi nombre es Anthony Aragón y yo voy a ser, les doy la bienvenida a esta reunión y quería explicarles a todos que tenemos interpretación en español. Para escuchar la interpretación, al favor de conectarse usando una tableta o una computadora, puede usar su teléfono también, y pulse el icono de interpretación, que es el globo que está en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla, y es muy importante que seleccione el lenguaje de su preferencia. Okay, Anthony, we're good to go.
Great, thank you. So you should see the gold. Oh, so before we see the gold, I don't know why I've got gold on my mind. I apologize. Before you see the globe in the corner, I want to introduce our facilitator for this evening's meeting. And this is Catherine Archuleta with Dimension Strategies, and she's going to begin facilitating, starting with our virtual reminders.
I know you're used to this. Most of you have been in our meetings before, but for those of you who haven't, welcome. And to make it easier, and you know, Zoom makes our lives complicated all the time, and we're not able to be in front of one another. So we're going to use all the tools we have to make sure that we hear from everybody. So if you would please mute yourself if you're not speaking, that way we don't have the distraction and background noise from every individual. And there's also a chat window, and sometimes you want to ask a question or you want to remind yourself or just check on something, use the chat window. We monitor it very carefully. And we'll be able to, it's one way of communicating with us directly or asking questions or even saying, I'd like to save this for a later opportunity. We certainly don't want you just to use the chat. We have Q&As time in throughout the presentation. So we'll be able to use that as well. But because we don't have hands raised and we can't see everybody at the same time, we like to use that chat function as a way to communicate in this Zoom environment. So the agenda is fairly simple tonight, but there's a lot of information that we want to share with you. So hang on to your seats. We've got a lot of good things to tell you about today. You can see them up on the screen: the West Area Neighborhood Planning Initiative, or the NPI, the Denver Moves Everyone update, as well as the Ped and Transit Improvement Project. We'll be going over that. And then also we want to be sure and talk about the next meeting so that we can get that in your planning documents, your calendar, whatever you use, even pen and paper. I'm often called upon to do that as well because I can't always keep my computer straight. So a good agenda tonight, lots of presentation, but we don't want to overwhelm you with information. We want to give you an opportunity to ask questions and to have discussion, and also to voice any concerns you might have. It's really important to us that we get your feedback. These neighborhood planning initiatives and the improvement projects really rely on your feedback to the planners and designers, and we really hope that you'll take every opportunity. There's no question that is uninformed or too small, I'm sorry, to be asked. Please, if you have a concern, let us know. Everybody here who's from DOTI and from the city, other city agencies, and our consultants are really eager to hear from you. So please take advantage of both chat and the Q&A period. So we're going to start out with the West Area Neighborhood Planning Initiative, or the NPI, and its schedule. And Eugene Howard is going to start us off on that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eugene Howard. I'm a senior city planner with the City and County of Denver in our planning department. I am fortunate to be the program or project manager for the West Area Plan, which is an area or neighborhood plan that consists of 6 neighborhoods. And of those 6, West Colfax neighborhood is included. I've been asked to be very brief this evening, so I'm just going to touch on a couple of things in the interest of time. But I will put information related to the project website and my contact information in the chat as soon as I finish giving my brief update. So there are some members here who are on the steering committee. We have a collection of citizens from the 6 neighborhoods, including West Colfax, that have been representing your interests as it relates to land use and transportation planning that is going to be in this content with recommendations and policy suggestions in the West Area Plan. We are working very diligently internally at the city to review our very first fully complete draft document. And our intent is to bring that document forward in the first quarter of 2022 and really ask you and residents, citizens in the planning area to let us know how we're doing. Did we really address the major key issues that face your neighborhoods, including some of the topics that will be covered tonight? So we are really working hard to get that very first draft ready for everyone's review and feedback. And one of the things, the second point, so many of you are connected to other organizations and other community groups within your neighborhoods. And so we are really asking for your help, so that when we do launch the first draft of this document, to make sure that we are touching all the people and organizations that really need to be aware that this document exists. So again, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. Would love for you to be thinking about, is there an organization that you're a part of that's in West Denver that ought to know about the West Area planning process so that they can participate and give us their feedback and just know what the document contains. So Again, I wanted to be very brief, but we'll just encourage you all to check out the website where you can find more information about the West Area Plan. And if you have specific questions, you can reach out to me. And then lastly, of course, if there's organizations that you feel we ought to reach out to in the first quarter when we're ready to really hit the ground running, sharing the information and recommendations contained in it, we'd love to hear and get that feedback from you. So that's really all I wanted to kind of quickly cover tonight. And I will excuse myself. I'll be here. I'm going to turn my camera off and I will put information in the chat. And if there are questions that come up for me, I'll let the team notify me, but I'll be here in the background. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. I think we're going to now move on to the Denver Moves Everyone update. And Beth,
Yes.
there you are.
Hey,
I didn't see
Hi,
you.
everyone.
There you are.
Yeah, I will be doing the update this evening. If you want to go to the next slide, the city is doing a citywide transportation plan. And so if you haven't heard about this, now is the time for you to hear about it and get involved. This is a really amazing effort. It's quite a big undertaking, and it is to set the vision and the values for the transportation system going forward in the future through 2050. It is to determine what kind of investments should be made in our transportation system and how we can serve everyone. So I do want to mention Sam Piper is the project manager from the city for this project, and he just wasn't able to make it this evening. So that's what this is. And if you go to the next one, one of the notes that he would like to be made is that, you know, we have Denver Moves Peds and Trails, we have Denver Moves Bicycles and Transit. So we have all these plans that have addressed elements of our street. But Denver Moves Everyone is really about the whole street and how these all work together. And so making this, you know, one vision, moving people and integrating all our modes as a system. So that's really the intent of this job. Last slide is just that we would love for you to get involved. And if you go to this website, you'll see that there is quite a bit of information. And right now there is a survey open. There's a history page that highlights some of our historic transportation evolution. And there's a lot of questions about what do you think the future of transportation looks like for the city? And what are the aspects of it that you think would be interesting to contemplate? So just encourage everybody to go to this website and try to find a way to get involved with this study as well. Okay, Catherine?
Okay, so now I'm echoing everywhere. Am I okay? I would like to introduce the West Colfax Pedestrian and Transit Improvement Project, which is going to take most of our discussion time tonight. So Lisa's going to start out for us and introduce a number of different people as we roll through the project description.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Catherine. Hi, my name is Lisa Hilt. I am the Doty project manager for this West Colfax Pedestrian and Transit Improvement Project. We're currently in the design phase to take the project to 100% design and then into construction. Our project team, yep, thank you. Our project team is Nancy Lambertson with Muller Engineering Company. That's our design consultant. Riley Lamai, our planning lead for Doty, and Beth Vogelsang, our principal planner with OV Consulting, and myself. Next slide, please. The goal of our project is to increase pedestrian safety and transit efficiency along the Colfax corridor between Sheridan Boulevard and Irving Street. And then next slide, yep. And this is a schedule of our timeline of kind of where we're at in the process. So back in 2019, Riley led the effort for the concept design along this corridor. And many of you may remember participating in these public meetings to review the concept in the early stages and providing some feedback back in 2019. In 2020, funding was obtained for full design of the project thanks to the Elevate Denver Bond Program. So after that, we were able to get Muller Engineering on board, our design consultants. So they started design of the project in early 2021. And kind of concurrently with that, the project also received CDOT Safer Main Street Initiative funds for construction of the project. So the project is fully funded at this point. And now we're here at this little red marker with our public meeting number 3. So we just wanted to make sure we give the community an update of how we got to this point, because it's been a while since we talked to you last, and where we're at and where we go from here. We'll have another public meeting in the spring of 2022, so we can get some more updates out there before the final design is done. And that will be the end of 2022. And then following in 2023, we'll move into construction. So we're moving right along with this project. And now I'm going to let Riley talk about the planning history of the project and how we got to this point. So Riley.
All right, thanks so much, Lisa. And again, my name is Riley Lemie. I'm a city planner with DOTI. And as Lisa just stated, we started this project back in 2019. That was when we led a process to identify what the improvements would look like and then refine those improvements thanks to the community's input. And I know that it's been a while since we met, since the last time that we met and had public feedback session was back in 2019. So I want to give everyone a refresher about how we got to where we're at right now. One of the things I wanted to remind everyone and kind of start with is what the overall community vision is for West Colfax. It's been established. And I'll start by saying that plans have been identified since all the way going back to 2006 that talk about making pedestrian safety improvements along West Colfax between Sheridan and Irving. And then there's been a number of other plans since that time, including the adoption of the Vision Zero Action Plan, as well as Blueprint Denver, the pedestrian plan, a pedestrian safety study, and numerous other plans that have continued to identify a strong need for pedestrian improvements along West Colfax. And so it's exciting that we finally are at the stage where not only do we have the funding to implement those improvements, but we are in a point where we're able to move forward with the design too. The vision for making West Colfax a pedestrian-friendly street and making it safer has been identified again in the update to the West Area MPI plan. And that talks about how we should be prioritizing pedestrians and making it safer for them, as well as the other modes that use the street. As I mentioned, or as Lisa mentioned, the Elevate Denver Bond Program in 2017 is the first place that actually funded those, is where we achieved some of the funding to move the project forward, and then the rest of the money is coming from CDOT to fund the full construction. Next slide, please. So I would just also want to give a reminder of why the project is needed. So why are we looking at improvements on West Colfax? And a couple of reasons, one of them being that the area is rapidly growing and that the past community plans call for a pedestrian-friendly or walkable Main Street. And to achieve that, that means that we really need to make some improvements to make the street safer for everybody. There are a lot of schools, there are more people living in the neighborhood than what lived there before. There's also businesses that operate along the corridor, as well as senior housing. So there's a lot of different people that all depend on this corridor, and it's really important that we make it safe. West Colfax is a part of something that's called the high injury network. And what that means is those are streets that have a high proportion of fatal and serious injury crashes. Where we see a lot of that, unfortunately, is that there has been a number of fatalities over the past decade or so, and that number continues to increase. And many of them have been pedestrians. So part of the Vision Zero philosophy, which means that zero traffic deaths are acceptable in our city, is trying to protect the most vulnerable users of the roadway. So trying to really improve that, not just for people driving, but also for bicycles, also for people that walk. So there were 7 fatalities just in 2019 and 2020 alone on West Colfax, 3 of them being pedestrians and 21 serious bodily injuries. So one of the goals here is really to come up with some solutions that try to bring that number down to 0. And that's really the goal that we're trying to achieve with the project. So just as a reminder of what we talked about back in 2019 and kind of where we ended up, was the idea of constructing a series of medians as well as what are called pedestrian bulbouts or curb extensions, which provide additional places to cross and are designed to improve pedestrian safety and improve safety for all modes by shortening the crossing distance of the street, by reducing conflicts between pedestrians and turning vehicles. Oftentimes that's where we're seeing crashes is from a conflict between turning vehicles and pedestrians. So this design is helping to reduce those crashes and then providing additional places to cross if needed, and then finally being able to slow down traffic. So some of the design treatments that you'll see that have been incorporated into the design are curb extensions. And again, what this means is really where you're bringing in the curb a little bit further from what it exists today. And that helps with shortening the crossing distance for pedestrians. And it also helps to slow down turning vehicles and provides places for green infrastructure in the future. And then median islands are designed to help reduce the number of conflicts between turning vehicles and a pedestrian that's walking down the street or crossing the street. They also can act as a traffic calming device. And so just by creating additional friction on the roadway, so they help to slow down traffic. And then they also, again, provide a place to cross if necessary. And then finally, as a part of the project, we're also looking at how to improve transit as well. So there is bus bulbouts, which are something kind of similar to a curb extension. Really what that's designed to do is to provide a expanded waiting area for passengers, and then it's a place for the bus to be able to quickly let passengers on and off. So those are some of the things that have been proposed, or some of the things that are have been incorporated into the design. Next slide. So just as a reminder, we first kicked off the public process back in 2019. That meeting took place in June. That was one of our in-person meetings that took place in the library on West Colfax. We had kind of started off trying to work to hear community feedback about what they would like to see improved. And based on that input, that helped us to establish some different design options for how we can make safety improved on the West Colfax corridor. That took place at that first meeting in June, and then we came back and refined that into a preferred design back in September of 2019. And so that design option was selected based on the input and that we heard from you, as well as based on the crash information and on the data that we have, kind of an understanding of where we're seeing crashes along the corridor. So some of the key concerns that we heard were, of course, pedestrian safety, especially around the Corky Gonzalez Library, as well as the elementary schools that are along the street, so including Colfax Elementary. There was also a comment about, could we potentially look at moving the signal at Mead to Lowell Street? There was some kind of community discussion that they felt like that was really the busier street that should have a signal. Some of the other issues that were brought up were drainage and just how does that work with bulb outs, and a lot of times right now the snow gets moved onto the sidewalk, so what can we do to prevent that? There was a lot of discussion about landscaping. So if we're putting in medians, can they not be in concrete? We also talked about how do we make public transportation and transit better in the design. And then finally, we also heard comments about parking and about just the general speeds along Colfax. So I'm going to hand it off to Nancy, who's going to describe how we've since 2019 incorporated some of those things into the design as we move into the next phases. So Nancy, I'll hand it to you.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Riley. Yes. So this is an example of what we're doing when Riley was talking more about the bulb outs, and you can see here, this is Tennyson on the left, which is a signalized intersection, and then Stewart Street on the right, which would remain a stop control. And so some of the things that we're doing are, as he said, putting in raised median islands in the middle of Colfax, and then these bulb outs would come into the street a little bit. That helps with a couple of things. It provides more space for people to wait to cross Colfax. As you can see in the corners, and more of a directional ramp, so you're actually put directly into the appropriate crossing. You can also see too, especially at Tennyson along the north leg, how putting these bulb outs in shortens the crossing distance. That's going to decrease the time it's going to take to cross the street. And then also too, if you look at the raised medians, I don't know, Fernando, if you're running this, if you can kind of show the median crossings. These little kind of cut throughs, these are pedestrian refuges that will allow everyone to cross one direction at a time. We're a little ahead of ourselves there. And so these bulb outs will occur at 17 of the intersections, and we'll show a little bit later where we're making improvements on the north side of the street versus the south side. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have 8 new landscape median refuge islands that will be throughout the corridor. A benefit of this will be that 60 plus left turn conflicts will be prevented. So that means when you are trying to cross Colfax at one of these locations that is not a signal, you will not have to worry about looking out for a left turning vehicle from the other direction. We will still be providing the ability for everyone to turn left at the signalized intersections throughout the corridor. Next slide, please, Fernando. This is just a kind of an illustration or rendering of what we're wanting to do with the medians. We're looking at including landscape to increase vegetation and also the aesthetics along the corridor. Will be mostly bushes and shrubs. And then you can see too with the cutout in the middle of the median, it's a safe place for you to wait while you're waiting for gaps in traffic and you're wanting to cross Colfax. It also means that you are only crossing one direction at a time and having to look one direction and not having to navigate multiple vehicles. Next slide, please, Fernando. Riley did mention this a little bit with the traffic signal locations. I know that in the concept we were considered taking the signal out from Meade and putting it at Lowell and then also adding one at Vrain. We did some additional traffic analysis, and at this point in time, neither one of these locations warrant a signal, but so that we don't preclude it in the future when the traffic volumes get up to where we can put in a signal, we are actually not putting in medians at these locations to provide the ultimate flexibility to DOT in the future. And then also pedestrians will still have the signals at every few blocks to cross if you prefer to cross at a signal with a green light as opposed to at a mid-block crossing. So I don't know, Beth or anyone, if there are any chat questions going on, because I think I lost that window.
Yeah, I don't see any chat questions. Oh, nope. But now's the time, as a little break in the presentation, and wondering if any of the community members have any questions for our presenters about what you've just heard. Hi, John. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm a little bit confused as to why you decided not to put the medians in. Could you explain that further, please?
Specifically, can you go back one slide? So this is just specifically at Lowell and at Vrain. We are not putting the medians in because we anticipate, in maybe a 5 to 10 year period, that signals will be warranted. Both DOT and CDOT would be very interested in installing signals, and so that that infrastructure would not have to be pulled out, and those signals are not precluded in the future, so people could turn left off of Lowell onto Colfax. The same thing at Vrain. The decision was made to not put in medians at those locations. However, we do have raised medians throughout the rest of the corridor. Did that answer your question?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Misha?
Has there been discussion about adding traffic control signals or other speed mitigation devices to any of the north-south cross streets? I live off of Knox, and people drive on it like it's federal, and particularly by the park. And so that seems like especially with the park being rebuilt, that seems like a real risk in terms of pedestrian safety, but I'm not sure if that's been included in the plan at all.
I will defer to somebody else. We're just looking right at Colfax. So I don't know, Lisa or Eugene. There's Eugene.
Thank you for that question. Through our work in the West Area planning process, we've heard a lot of community feedback around the concerns with speeding, not only along Knox, but in other sort of north, south, east, west streets that really can get you from one side to the other through the area.
Mhm.
One idea that we are looking to advance as a recommendation, so not yet a project, but a very strong recommendation in the plan, particularly on Knox at the park, is considering a raised intersection. We believe that that could do a number of things. Number one, and first and foremost, slow cars down for safety. Number two, demonstrate or sort of visually illustrate that this is a different location on the street. And if we are able to incorporate color and materials really to, again, visually send the signal that this is a crossing for pedestrians, particularly as Denver Housing Authority imagines redeveloping their Westridge Homes property, which is right there. And as you mentioned, Paco Sanchez Park is on the other side. We really would like to try to slow traffic down and send those visual signals to automobile drivers that we've got people using this intersection for a variety of different purposes, and not only just for vehicular movement. So those are some of the ways that we are looking to try to slow traffic down along Knox.
Thanks, that's good to know. And like you said, I guess that's pre even being a project stage, but that's still nice to know it's been at least a topic of discussion. Is that an area where the fire department, is going to need to buy in? Because I know that they use it. I'm not always sure why they use it relative to using federal, but from what I've heard in the past, they've been a barrier to any form of safety mitigation efforts on that corridor.
It's the responsibility of all of our city agencies to weigh in on proposed projects. We will be circulating and having conversations with all of our partner agencies within the city as we get this plan out for review. The review is currently taking place internally, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting tonight. And so there will be a precedent for a raised intersection established in the Sun Valley neighborhood as a part of the Sun Valley redevelopment that's taking place there. So we will be giving them the second opportunity to collectively work together to adopt and adapt to interventions that maybe historically we haven't considered as a city. So we are hopeful, the West Area team, that by having an example already set and one that will get built, that it will sort of be a proof of concept for our safety agencies. So that's a long answer to say that we are prepared to work with them, but because human safety is our priority, we want to push the envelope as much as we need to. Because again, we want this to be a safe crossing, slow traffic down, and really let the park be an amenity for the entire community. And Eugene, private citizen, would like to encourage partners to worry less about that 1, 2, 3 times a year. And let's really look at our investments for every single day for all types of users.
Thank you, Eugene. Aaron, and then we'll go to.
Sorry, can I step in for a second? And all of this, obviously, there are recommendations on the West Area, neighborhood planning initiative, but all of these would need to be analyzed and approved by DOTI. The race intersection that Eugene was just speaking with about on Sun Valley neighborhood, obviously is one of those first that we are trying to implement. And it was definitely a process, and it's not like it required a lot of steps in order to get to that. So it's not something that we would be looking at, it definitely needs to be very thoroughly analyzed, and it only fits particular locations. If folks want to learn more about sort of the traffic calming, elements that we're looking at changing and adding standards and specifications to our plans and programs, they can take a look at the complete street guidelines that we recently approved earlier, I believe late last year or earlier this year. But, those recommendations, obviously, we know that NOx is an issue. But we don't solely want to just sort of, there are specific elements that need to be met in order to do a particular solution. And all of that is obviously under the umbrella of DOTI, who needs to approve those.
Thank you, Gabby. We're going to go to Aaron, and then we're going to answer a question in the chat from Jonathan.
Thank you. I'm guessing this might be a little out of scope, but I just want to understand why, speed cameras or red light cameras aren't maybe more brought in as part of this traffic calming process, since that does, I think, often slow cars down when they get a ticket in the mail. So I just want to bring that up.
This is Riley. That's a great question, and it is something that has not been looked at as a part of the project yet. I think it's a great suggestion, and I'm not quite familiar with when and what triggers red light cameras and kind of looking into that. But through our Vision Zero program, that's something that I would happy to relay back to them, who are a little bit more up to speed on that than I am.
Thank you, Aaron. Nancy, do you see the question from Jonathan about the width of the pedestrian refuges?
Yes, and I was actually just typing in a response, but it'll be easier to verbalize it. Jonathan, we would be looking at making those at grade. I mean, a little bit of slope to make sure, ice and snow don't sit in them. But otherwise, to your concern, especially as going up and down, it would be flat going through the median as opposed to how curb ramps work. And then we're also looking at 8 to 10 foot widths on those cuts. And so that it should allow people to go in opposite directions and still have somewhere to stand and feel comfortable with. So very good question. And we definitely are having considerations for that. And I'll follow up with Riley on the previous one with some cameras and everything. We are looking through each one of these locations right now and applying Denver's guidance when it comes to uncontrolled, what they call their uncontrolled crossings. And we're working through that analysis right now. I just don't have an update for all of them at this point in time.
Thank you. And I just want to be sure that the DOTI folks see the message from a community member right about the crossing at Weir Gulch. I don't think it's a question, but I think it's an issue that they'd like to see included in our thinking. Anything else? Any other questions, concerns you'd like to share with the team? So maybe we can go on to the next section.
All right. So as Riley had talked about before, one of the things that came up during the planning process was concerns about drainage along Colfax. And also too, as we all know, sometimes when you put bulb outs, wanting to make sure that you're not creating a bird bath, for lack of a better term. And so we are definitely looking at that in detail. We're adding storm sewer infrastructure with the new bulb outs to improve drainage, adding 5 inlets at this point in time to supplement the existing system. That may end up being more as we continue to go through our design. We're very aware of those concerns. Another example here, as you can see at Lowell, where we're accounting for parking on the south side of the street. The other benefit of doing that is in cases where you do have a snowstorm and we do need to store the snowplow piles, it can be done in the parking areas and it wouldn't be, say, piled on the curb ramps, on the sidewalk, or obviously out in the street. So there are some benefits to doing these bulb outs.
Can we do some pointers to show what you're referring to?
Yeah, okay, so yes. Like, I'm sorry I'm not controlling it. I'm on my screen. But Fernando, if you can kind of go along on the left, there is, oh, actually no, on the left there's an inlet right there. It's a square box and we would put one there anywhere where there's a spot that we might be, water might want to sit, and then we'll be tying into the existing system, which is shown in pink down the middle of the system or down the middle of the street. We're also looking at the side streets. There are a couple of places that have current drainage issues, and we will be adding inlets with grates, that will collect the water as needed to make sure that we are mitigating any of those existing concerns. And then if you can maybe show on the aerial to the right, Fernando, there's a couple of cars that are kind of parked there. These would be parking areas, and you could see how they're out of the lanes of traffic. And so if we had a big snowstorm event or anything to that effect, you could store the snow there instead of piling it up on the sidewalk, which is some of the concerns too in this stretch of Colfax, knowing that sidewalk space is very valued and needed. So did that explain your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nancy.
Hey, please just pipe up if you have any additional ones. So let's go to the next slide. So I talked about parking a little bit, and I'm sure many of you were familiar with the study that was done quite some time ago and the way they kind of redid striping along Colfax to account for parking. Now we're going to be formalizing it. And so we are taking between Yates or Sheridan and Raleigh, basically all the parking spaces for the local businesses will be on the north side. And then we'll be shifting a little bit between Raleigh so that the parking spaces for the local businesses will be on the south side in those areas. By consolidating the parking like this, we're actually going to be increasing the number of spaces on the street for the local businesses by 30. So something that too, I know everyone was interested in. Also too, by shifting between the sides and also maybe repurposing some of the existing roadway, we're going to be providing room for the medians with the landscaping. And then also the parking and the bulbouts have been shown to encourage slower speeds, which I know is also a concern with everyone on this corridor. And I think that is it for kind of the design details and maybe another round of Q&A.
Any questions about the design that Nancy just described? Please, John. Go ahead.
Hi, were sidewalk widenings considered as part of the project?
I don't know, Lisa, if you want to jump in on, or Riley on the planning effort. We are doing what we can at the corners to provide.
I can address the question. So really what the scope of the project and it's a great question that I hear with regards to the sidewalk widening. What we're trying to start with with this project is improving the overall crossing safety for pedestrians and addressing the safety issue. What we're relying on is to add wider sidewalks in the future is that as redevelopment occurs along the corridor, that the buildings will be set back further to allow for those wider sidewalks. And so in certain areas,
fill in the parking spaces instead?
Great question as well. We are trying to kind of meet the needs of everyone on the corridor, and so we also want to be able to support the businesses that are there too.
Pedestrians are very good shoppers.
Agree.
Thank you, John. There's a couple of questions in the chat. One from Lisa. Knox was mentioned. Are there plans for adding Parker or other traffic calming along Perry Street south of Colfax? Riley, is that you?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Knox was mentioned. Are there any plans to add parking or other traffic calming along Perry Street south of Colfax?
I would have to look a little bit further into the design detail, but something that I did want to mention, and I actually wanted to mention this earlier, is there was recently a plan or something that was completed that's called the Neighborhood Transportation Management Program for the West Colfax and Villa Park areas. And what that looked at was, aside from West Colfax Avenue, some of those other cross streets and making additional improvements there. So that did look at that, and I would have to go do the study to be able to see what was done there. However, that was something that we did look at.
And I can add just
Sorry,
go ahead, Gabby.
NPI, I'm going to add the link to the final report for the West Colfax Villa Park Neighborhood Planning Initiative that Riley mentioned on the chat.
And just for this group to be aware, because we do work with one another internally, and the project that Riley just mentioned, we were fortunate through the West Area Planning, the land use planning, visioning process to understand the feedback and share the feedback related to not only the projects that we're talking about this evening, but the other project that Riley just mentioned. And while the Neighborhood Transportation Management Program is looking to actually do projects related on their work that they've conducted, we will be reflecting a lot of their work in the West Area Plan as it relates to transit, transportation, and mobility, people moving around within the neighborhood, so that any projects that may not necessarily have identified funding today, the ideas and the wishes from the community don't get lost. So we are capturing that information in the West Area Plan so that as funding becomes available, the ideas and the community solutions are captured somewhere so that we can refer back to those.
Thank you, Eugene. Gabby, do you want to take Misha's question about monitoring development and zoning applications for the area? Misha's always curious about what new things are being planned.
Actually, that would be a CPD question, so that would be Eugene.
Oh, Eugene again. On the spot, Eugene.
Yeah, Eugene represents community planning, and the rest of the team, some of the team members here is Dottie, so different departments.
Okay.
So I'll try to be really brief and of course reach out to me if you'd like a little bit more information if this response doesn't get at the nature of your question. Communities get notified about projects in a couple of ways. So for example, if a project needs to have a different zoning allowance, zoning district, in order to have the project be created, community members, registered neighborhood organizations, individuals that live within, I believe it's a 200-foot radius of the location, will get notified by mail by the city. Now, if a project is being proposed and it does not need to change its zoning, it doesn't need any additional allowance or regulation, a person can develop with what we refer to as their development rights. You know, they have the right to develop their project already in place. So in those instances, no one may know about it until you see activity on the site. Now, the caveat to that is for any sort of medium to larger scale development projects, the city does track those larger projects on our development services website. So I'm not exactly sure. I haven't been in this area of work for a couple of years, but if I remember correctly, I believe it's 3 or 4 units and above are tracked on this development services webpage. And I'll quickly try to Google it and put the link to that in the chat. So you can either be notified or you can track larger scale developments through that web portal.
Let's move on to Heidi.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to talk again about what John brought up about the sidewalks, and I really want to stress that I don't buy into the theory that, you know, we need cars to control cars and more cars are going to help us be safer from cars, and that it just seems odd that, you know, development will be in charge of making sure that the sidewalks and the pedestrians are safe, and that the cars are given a priority. And the cars are the problem. And the cars, there's plenty of good studies out there that talk about cars not supporting local business and pedestrians, and bike traffic, slower traffic does. So I just want to emphasize that and back up those comments in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi, for your comments. I think we have a question from Jerry. Understand correctly, the possibility of having a traffic signal at Lowell and Colfax is not going to happen at the present time. And can you discuss how that was decided?
Yeah, I'll take that. Jerry, it's a very good question because that's what we were thinking of during the concept. We have to, especially since this is a CDOT facility, we have to go through a process of looking at the pedestrian and the traffic and the vehicular traffic numbers. And it's called signal warrants, and there's a whole big book related to it, in a process through CDOT where you have to go through and analyze, and you have to meet a certain number of those warrants in order for CDOT to permit a signal. We're just not at that threshold yet. But it is something I know that is in Dottie's mindset, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're monitoring that over the next couple of years with the idea of putting in a signal as soon as it is warranted.
Nancy, another question that came up is whether Dottie is considering lowering the speed limit on the road, or asking, is there intent to ask CDOT to lower the speed limit?
You know, I'll defer if Dottie has had those those conversations with CDOT to Riley or Lisa, but it is, I mean, this is one thing where they are partnering with CDOT, did get some money through CDOT's program, but there is an aspect of we do have to go through and get CDOT's concurrence on any of these decisions.
Riley, did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to add that that's a great question. We are working, as Nancy just said, we are working with CDOT on a number of different things. With regards to speed, lowering the speed limit, we are going to, the speed was actually recently lowered to 30. And so I think we're going to be studying that for a while and then be making recommendations as needed. So I don't have a great answer at the time for you, but that is something that we're continuously collaborating with CDOT on. So.
Lisa, did you want to add to it?
Nope, Riley covered it. Thank you, Riley.
Okay. Eric, did you want to add some information on that one?
Sure. Just as the one of the last questions had to do with when and how intersections get signalized, there's also a process for how speed limits are set. And much of that is based on what people are traveling, and arbitrarily reducing speeds is really difficult to do on a state highway. In fact, I've seen people ask for CDOT to do studies to reduce the speed limit, and the study said the speed limit should be raised, and then CDOT, knowing that information, actually raised the speed limit. So it is difficult.
So Lisa and Riley, if you'll take note of Jonathan's comment on the warrant count on Lowell, to make sure that we acknowledge that comment has been heard.
Go
ahead.
Just a few minutes. We did look at existing conditions, and we also looked at the proposed conditions, like when we put in medians, traffic diverted, left turns, and things to that effect. So we did take the consideration of that into account at Lowell and at Meade, and it's just not quite at that threshold. It's close though, and you know, it is at the top of Denver traffic list to continue to monitor.
A city thing about, well, I think it's a city thing. I'm not sure about the Colfax interchange.
Let's go to John and then to Heidi.
Regarding these warrants that we're talking about, to back up Jonathan's comment, it's completely backwards. If you want behavior to change in a certain way, you don't wait until the behavior changes on its own and then change the physical environment or the speed limit. You change the speed limit and the physical environment to get the behavior that you want. That's insane that you would think that you could do it the other way around.
I'm just going to tell you, we have to follow CDOT's process.
Thank you, John. Heidi, did you have a comment?
I didn't, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand, but
Okay.
yeah, I would just, as long as I'm on here, I would love more conversation about like trying to address car culture and the speeds and yeah, I just want to back up what John's saying because it does seem like crazy making.
So maybe that's a conversation that the team could have with Heidi and even include John in that outside of this meeting. That's an ongoing concern. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
And Anthony, we'll make sure we follow up with that.
Yeah, we'll make sure.
Okay.
I'll kind of add that to our list of ongoing outreach that we'll be doing here, especially after the first of the year.
Great, thanks. Okay, do we have a next? I don't see any more hands up. Am I missing anybody?
We're in the interest of time. We actually need to advance on to the next thing.
Yes, okay. Sure, Riley, go ahead.
Could I interject before we advance? Sorry. Where are we with CDOT? And sorry, I couldn't figure out how to put my hand up on the thing, but could we get someone from CDOT to join us in this conversation? And is there a contact who we should be referring to from the West Colfax group? Where is CDOT in this process with us?
So I can speak to that. So CDOT is funding our construction project. They're also part of the review of design of this project as well. And Denver is leading the project. This is our local agency project that Denver is leading. They are involved in review on the background. If you would like, we could see if they would participate in a one-off meeting.
I mean, from a perspective of a citizen, I would hope if we're leading the project that we would be able to not defer to CDOT as we should CDOT this, CDOT that. I think it should be Denver this, Denver that, in the sense of this West Colfax Viaduct and community engagement process.
Sure, and I understand your concerns with that. The issue we're having is this is a state highway, right? Colorado 40. So CDOT really has control over the right of way of this road. So we're partnering together to work with CDOT. Even though it is in Denver, we do have to follow CDOT procedures and guidelines through this area.
It might, I think, Lisa, if we can work with Anthony to see if we can get a conversation with CDOT, that would be very helpful to the community, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. We can.
Okay, so we're going to move quickly, and Heidi, we see your note in the chat. Thank you for doing it there, and we'll move on to the transit.
All right, so just to quickly wrap us up here, did want to mention that we are making some improvements for transit as well, including the bus bulbouts that you'll see, as well as some stop consolidation. And what that does is it reduces delay for transit, and it makes the time to travel down Colfax taking transit a little bit less. And then we'll also be adding specialized signals that give transit buses priority at the intersection that allows them additional time to get through, which again also reduces delay. You can go to the next slide, please. One thing I also want to add is that there are some near-term Vision Zero improvements that are planned to be made in the spring. So we'll actually be doing a near-term version of this in the spring using paint and post, similar to treatments that exist on Vision Zero, or sorry, similar to what exists on East Colfax. And you might wonder why we're going to be doing this in paint and post and then going to be constructing it in the following year. And that's because the Vision Zero team really does recognize that there is a need to make improvements now. And so we want to to get something installed that in the near term, while we are also making the improvements in the long term. So I just wanted to keep that part of it out. I'm going to quickly demonstrate, I know we're just about over time. I am going to quickly demonstrate though a tool that we're using to get your different comments or feedback on the design. So there is a link, and we'll be posting this in the chat, and this will also be made available on the website. That's bit.ly, so bit.ly/West Colfax Designs. And I'm actually going to share my screen right now just so that you can see this. What this does, when you click on this, what this tool does is it'll actually bring you to a special tool that we've been using that's called Conveo. And that provides a little bit more information on the project, but it also lets you see the different designs. So let's say that you're really interested in seeing a part of the corridor. You can actually click section by section of the corridor to be able to see the full design. So just as an example, let's say that you were really interested in looking at the section between Vrain and Tennyson. If you pull that up, or if you click on that section, it'll actually go there. And then you would just use the tools to be able to zoom in, and it would provide a closer view of the design. And then if you have any comments, so for example, let's say that you know of a business that has truck traffic that is coming in and out, or you have an idea about landscaping or an idea about art or that kind of thing that you would really just like us to know, or an additional concern, you can click it on the page to be able to add a comment, and it'll let you add your comment there. So just wanted to kind of show how we're using this tool or utilizing this tool in order to be able to get feedback on the design. And this is helping us as we're continuing to advance this into the final stages. If you have any other general comments or questions, that can also be filled out into this form here. And then this just provides a little bit of an explanation on the design itself. So going back to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can go back to the main slide. Again, I apologize that we're a little bit over time. I just wanted to wrap up by saying that we understand that some of you may have additional questions or want to get in touch with us. We're going to be continuing to do additional outreach, both to property owners and businesses along the corridors, as well as doing one-on-one meetings. And so we do invite you to email us. We can set those up at this email address that's right here at denvermoves@denvergov.org.
Thank you, Riley. And also don't forget that you can reach out to Anthony Aragon, and he's going to give you his contact information at, I think in the next slide, maybe. And as we talk about the next meeting, always remember that you can't remember who you should contact within DOTI, that Anthony is a good person to guide you to the person you need to get to. So please don't forget that. So Anthony, do you want to talk about the next West Area CAG meeting?
Yeah, very quickly. And just, I'm seeing some sort of information in the chats. Originally, when we scheduled the meeting, we did schedule it from 6 to 7, but then we moved it from 5 to 6. And I know that over the last couple of weeks, and even as early as today, this afternoon, we sent out information that the meeting was 5 to 6. I sincerely apologize that the people had the meeting 6 to 7. That was the original time, but a couple of weeks ago, we did move the time because there was another meeting with Councilwoman Torres in Southwest Denver that we were trying to accommodate. So I just wanted to just acknowledge and apologize if that information was not relayed, but I know that we tried our best to send the updated information with the meeting link. So obviously we need to do a better job of that, and I own that. Secondly, we have established a community advisory group for the West area, the West Colfax program of projects. And we do meet on a monthly basis. We just kicked off this CAG process in November. Our first meeting was in November. And we are going to host our next CAG meeting the first Thursday of January, which will be January the, I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the correct date. Thursday, January the 6th will be our next CAG meeting. The time is from 5 to 6 p.m. That's when the CAG meetings are scheduled. I did put in the chat our bit.ly for the West Area Colfax program of projects, and my contact information is on the homepage. If you would like to be a part of the community advisory group process, we invite you, we encourage you to join us. Just because we've had 2 meetings doesn't mean that all of a sudden now no one else can be a part of the community advisory group. That group will continue to grow over time as we begin sharing more project information with the community. So if you would like to be a part of the CAG process, please send me an email. Also, I tried to capture your information in the chat. but we'll follow up with a potential CDOT conversation. And if you are interested in joining that meeting, please email me and let me know, or you can place it in the chat now, which will also be part of the recording. So after this meeting tonight, we will be posting the PowerPoint presentation. We'll be posting the meeting chat, and the recording will be in both English and Spanish. So I just wanted to share all of that information with all of you. Thank you.
So anything else, Anthony, that we need to add in? Any, appreciate all the comments at the sort of the end of the chat room, and we record all those to make sure that we get back to you if you need to get back to, and that those of you who are looking to meet with CDOT or on bicycles, we'll be sure to follow up.
Yeah, I think there's a request that a few folks from the city stay on. And if you are looking to join that bike meeting, I'm searching right now for that link and we'll get that posted in just a minute. So Riley or others, I don't know if you're able to stay on for a minute.
Yep, I'm able to stay on for a few minutes. If Lisa, if you are able to stay as well.
Yeah, I can stay.
Okay, so we're going to say goodnight to everybody else. And thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you in January 6th.